Okay, I'm going to start with, because I want to get done by 8:30 so I can meet with group 1 and 3. We're going to present, the first to present on 14th, April 13th and 15th. I have my feedback uploaded under your group discussion link on the left hand side, so you want to download it. I'll pull it up when we discuss. I'll spend about 10 minutes with each group. If you have more questions, if you still have time. One of the group wanted to meet with me, Alex's group, the Microsoft group. I will see if we have time today at the end of the class we might be able to meet because we're meeting to users soon. But I intend to meet with group 1 and 3 today, and then I'll meet with group 6 and 2 on Tuesday, coming Tuesday, and 5 and 4 on next Thursday. If you want to meet with me beforehand, let me know, but that's my plan. I'll use the class time. It's very difficult to find a time outside of the class to meet with you guys. So bring your questions if you have any. I expect that you have most of the things done, if not written up, by the presentation date. The group project is not due up until the exam week. Still, I expect you to have most of the content done when you present. I will have a couple of more stuff. I'll have peer evaluation that you have to turn in at the end, not with your reports because they are anonymous, but you'll turn it in independently. You can either email it to me or slide it under my office door. So the peer evaluations will be posted, and I'll also post the evaluation sheet I used for the presentation. So I'll post both of those stuff right here, and I'll let you know about it. So peer evaluations are something that I do very keenly pay attention to. Usually it's not an issue at all for the MBA students, but if it is, I do want everybody to be contributing equally to the project. Next week on Tuesday, we have only 2 sets of lectures left. So Tuesday we'll talk about BI users. We talked a little bit about it when we did the failure cases for data warehousing. But I think the BI and use BI perspective that we have been using, and it is valuable only if the user adopts it. So we'll talk about the adoption of the BI in light of the user's expectations. And the last one is there is a submission if you want to submit. I should explicitly mention that. I was just looking at it. And I just mentioned what to write in the submission, but there's no submission written here. It seems like most of you have the 8 submissions and not likely to submit anything. But I really, really want you to go look at this. A lot of you are going to go into mid-sized or small organizations. You're not going to go into organizations who's going to have SAP or Oracle, and it is very important to know there are other alternatives, cheaper alternatives available. And even for big organizations, software as a service is very valuable. Now, analytics as a service is coming up as well, where you don't have to do your analytics in-house. So it is very important to be cognizant of IT technologies and services available to you, which doesn't necessarily cost billions of dollars. So that's what is coming up. I will start where we left off after I see the attendance. I'm going to talk about stuff that we didn't get a chance to talk about, or I got a feeling that I need to discuss explicitly. So I know you don't have your review printouts in front of you, but if you have it in an email or something, you might want to open it up. It will take me a while to read all of those. After I tell you to write 2,000 words, and I'm like, oh my God, 2,000 words is like a 30. I have a lot to read. So I will finish the reading of the book review, hopefully in a week, but it is taking me longer than I expected it to. So those grades will take a few weeks to be posted. If you can, if your grades are not being reflected the way I had explained a week ago, then come talk to me. I have looked. I only had one person who was very confused, but I think it was a student-specific question. I'm not going to go over that, but I'm assuming everybody knows how to do that grade. If you don't, come on. Bell, Boss, Brinkley, Brown,
Here.
Sahun,
Here.
Jan,
Here.
Shield,
Here.
Dodd,
Here.
Special back, Jan, Brian, Gidding, Jim, Harry Gentoo, Fury,
Here.
Perkin,
Here.
Lynn, McKee, Maine, McBride, here, Plum, Ritchie,
Here.
True,
Here.
Singh,
Yes, ma'am.
Strand, Moore,
Here.
Whitman,
Here.
Wong, okay, so we were discussing the title when we left off, but before I get into the discussion, day 2 discussion, what I got from your peer discussion is you understand the attributes that the book talk about in light of an analytical competitor who, if you want to evaluate who looks like analytical competitors, you will have some metrics to gauge them. I got that sense out of the peer discussion. I got the sense that you have a good understanding of the stages, the framework that Davenport put forth in terms of what are some of the stages that an organization typically would go through in order to become an analytical organization. I also got a sense that you kind of have an understanding of the pillars necessary to be an analytical organization. Your personal perspectives were interesting, some of which we'll talk about. But there are a few things that I really want to zoom in on. And I'll start with the title. You know, the competing in the title is very important. And we'll see whether it did convince you of what it was, what the thesis or the premise of the book was, competing on analytics. So we'll start with the title. That's where we left off. And I was asking you, what do they mean by new? So the title was Competing on Analytics, the New Science of Winning. So let's look at each of those words before we discuss the whole concept of competing. And does it really address competing on analytics successfully or not? At least did it convey that to you or not? So talking about new, and from what I recall, well, let me ask you again. There are two people who indicated what new means, and I left off without saying much. So let's start again. What does it mean to you after reading the book when you see the title, The New Science of Winning? What does new emphasize to you? I'm not, you can never know what the author really was saying, but to you, what is new?
To me, I don't think it's so much as analytics aren't exactly new science anymore. I mean, they've been around for a while, but I think at least in my perspective, new means, although it's not new science, it's new, but it's kind of like the industry norm now. It's becoming the next thing that companies need to do in order to be competitive.
So you are saying the new is in relation to the science.
The new application of the science, I guess.
Okay, new application of the science, and what you're saying is long one becomes strategic necessity rather than being an event. There will be a disadvantage if you don't. Okay, what else? What else comes to mind when you saw the title new? How many of you even paid attention to that? The second part of the title. Honestly. Because it took me a while to pay attention to the title. I would go into the article or the book, but title is very, very strong. Every time you read a book, you need to pay attention to the title. Okay, so anybody else on what new means? Well, I'll give you my perspective later on after we've discussed all three. But what does new convey to you?
Kind of like, buy this book, this is new, we should know about it.
It's something new here. So it almost has as an assumption that people are not using this widely, and it's fairly new, everything like that. And I'll talk more about it in a minute. The second part is this a sign? This new sign for winning, this is a sign. Analytics. The way they have described it, the way they have provided examples. Okay, before we even be going to science, what is science? How do you know something is a science versus not? What's that? Tested and true. So some of the attributes is evidentiary, right? So it is, you have evidence of something happening, and it is almost what you indicated, hypothesis is almost causality. It is implicit in that assumption. So something is true. You have proof also. What else? Versus you have a feeling. You believe in it, or you have a gut feeling about it. Okay. What else? What else do you think is science versus not? That's what capable of. Yeah. So it's not a one-time event. If you know something and you do that thing, whether it is promotion to make your customers loyal, it will happen again and again. It's not was a random event. Okay, so I'll just assume you have sense of what science is, but is competing on analytics and specific analytics the way it is described in the book, is that science? Was that? Okay, so it helps with what? The analytic helps in your context. What will it help with? Okay, so analytics gives you the proof. Right? That's what you're trying to get at. What else? Is analytics, the way it's explained in the book, fits the label of science?
I think the way that you can use analytics to make fact-based decisions, which is kind of scientifically, like that's a scientific model. You know, gathering information, or finding out what your hypothesis is, and being able to test that through analytics, and just having the information available.
So the main thing, we talked about it earlier, but the main thing in the book is being data-driven, fact-driven, evidence-driven, proof-driven. So yes, that is the concept of science. More specifically, well, the new is the new form of competition. That's what the author is saying. That whether I'm completely convinced on that or not, if we have time, we'll talk about it. But what they're saying is there's one other way you can compete. You could compete with scarce resources like oil. You could compete with strategic locations of your suppliers with your manufacturing. But this is once again a new way of competing. Is this science? I mean, there are many attributes that can be assigned to what is science. And one of the key things is causation. If you want to know what factor caused your customers to be loyal, you need to have some good proof that is fact-based. Science is not true. It is just a proof. If you continue doing it under certain circumstances, it'll always happen. So if you do A, B, and C in terms of marketing your product, your customers will become loyal. That A, B, and C should not be random, should be generalizable to the population, your customer population, should be valid. So causation is a big factor in science. You should be able to say what factor attribute to increase in the demand of your product. What factor leads to customer loyalty? What factor leads to precise pricing in overdose.com? So the causation is critical. Replicability is very critical. And we talked a little bit about it when we talked about data mining. And we're talking about Amazon saying people who bought this also bought this. It's very associative in nature. It's not causation, but still it should be replicable. You should have confidence in your proof when you say that if you give 60 chips to your customers versus 30 chips, a free room, and a steak dinner, then most of the time, 95% of the time, 60 chips is what your customer wants. And if that is a random effect, you're going to lose a lot of money. And you have just made a mistake in identifying what leads to selling of your product. So replicability is very key. And when you talk about replicative, your data has to be valid, your data has to be clean. You have to collect data in ways that you have very high confidence in saying, yes, factor A led to factor B. Now, not every time you need to know causation. Sometimes associative nature of science is also valuable. So people who bought the CD also bought these CDs very associative. You don't know the causation there. And it's still valuable. But this is what predictability, predicting how your customers will do, predicting how your consumers will behave, predicting how your engine, the way you have designed, will work in the long run in all types of roads. That's what is science. And that's what this kind of differentiates companies who do surveys, can figure out the association, but really do not know the prediction. Now, after having saying association is somehow not science, I have justified that that's also important. When you do surveys, you do know association. So, what do I mean by causation? A affects B. A, not just A is associated with B. Give you an example. People in Colorado are very adventurous. Okay, if that is a fact, then you might want to know whether people who end up in Colorado become adventurous or adventurous people just end up in Colorado. You know, we don't know. We just know that people in Colorado are adventurous. I mean, that is a good piece of information and can be helpful, but causation would say what causes one thing, what causes something to happen. So if you have factor A, it leads to factor B. Factor B leads to factor C. And association is that whenever factor B happens, for some reason factor A and C are also present, which doesn't help with demand prediction, doesn't help with forecasting, doesn't help with really profiling and predicting the behaviors of the consumer. So when I think you read in the book, I'm pretty sure they use the word experiments. Netflix used experiments. Horror used experiments. And they use experiments to drive at the causation. When Netflix has the 3 types of movie previews, one set of customers don't get any previews. One set of customers get previews one type of previews, and third set of customers get different type of movie previews. So that is the factor. In one set, there are no previews, absence of factor A. In other 2 sets, the factors are present, previews are present, and then you observe the behavior. And you can tell that presence of previews helps with customer loyalty or buying more movies or getting more CDs or whatever they're trying to predict, because you have controls. You have controlled a set of customers by not providing them with any previews. So you can easily say there was a factor present and absent and then observe their behavior. So when social sciences, human science is not perfect. Humans are not predictable by nature. But you try to predict as much as possible by conducting experiments. So yeah, you can, and that I don't know whether they drove this message or not. Surveys have been done extensively in organizations, but in not experiments or not so much. My other question, one question is why did they conduct experiments in Netflix and horror by designing experiments? Why didn't they just not ask the consumers what they want? I'm not going to demonize surveys. I do a lot of surveys and I do model causation using that too. But I'm just going to say, okay, why not just do surveys and ask, do you want 60 chips? Or do you want 30 chips, dinner, and a free room? Why can't we just ask?
Well, often with the survey, you might get a different result than it's going to be the true result if it actually put in practice. So if someone was going to act, they might actually act differently than they say they're going to act.
Yeah. Why is that? That could be true with the experiments too. But the selection of the population. So yeah, you have to select the population, the sample that represents your population. But that's true for sample like everything.
I was just going to say that a lot of times when people are filling out surveys, they think, well, they're never going to know that this was me, so I can write down what I think is looks like the better choice, or is gonna look like the more moral choice, or something like that, rather than when you're in an actual situation and you know, spur of the moment do what you actually would do, you know, so.
Socially favorable responses is what you see in this. What is right? You know, what you know is socially accepted or socially accepted responses. And in terms of, especially in terms of ethics and all, what should be done is reflected in surveys, not what you really do. And also, second is it's an assumption that you think that consumer knows what they want. They don't, and I mean, you know, you would hypothetically try to ask them a different thing without they being in that situation. You're really asking them to project or predict their own behavior. Some may be able to do it if they were in the same situation before, some may not. But when you do the experiments, behaviors unfold, and that is much closer to reality than it. The third thing was winning. So yeah, it is definitely a science if used properly, if used to do the things you just talked about. Then they talked about winning. Winning, since I already put it up here, what they mean by winning here is, of course, whenever there is a word winning, it assumes there's a competition there. And if you're competing, that means somehow doing better than your competitor. That is what they, I believe, meant by winning. So now when we are talking about winning, so then you talk about competition. It brings us to the, I think, the main and the central question for this book. But before we get to the book's way of viewing competition, tell me on what basis do companies usually compete? Think of any company. What is the basis of their competition? Think about a sports team, New England Patriots. What do they compete on?
Cheating.
Who is DD?
Cheating. Belichick, building locker rooms.
Okay, so coach, right? So, well, I thought it would be Brady, but obviously it is the coach that's more important. But no, really, it is the coach. So you're talking about a good coach, right? Competing on a good coach. Okay, that is one source of competition. What else? What else do they compete in?
Number of wins.
What's that?
Number of wins.
That's the outcome, right? But how do they get more number of wins than their competitors? That's the goal. Then they're winning. They win more than their competitors, I guess they're winning. But what is the basis? What helps them to win more? Yes, Dave.
They're trying to find out what the customers want. They're trying to predict what's going to happen in the future.
Okay, so that's a simpler thing. Customer wants them to win, right? So what is the source of their winning? Okay, money, capital resources, good. What else? Yeah. So what is the human resource? Personnel. Yeah, that's very key too. You know, coaching and strategy is key, but if you don't have the players to execute the plays that you have strategized, you're not going to win. So there's resources that are very key to their winning. One of them that was highlighted definitely was personnel, and you could argue that in order to get the personnel you want, you have to have the money. But I would challenge that. If you just have a bunch of high-paying players, that will not ensure that you'll win. But yeah, there are certain resources that companies compete on, and there are many ways, and you probably learned this in your strategy course. There are many ways of evaluating how companies compete. And I'm going to use a theory, resource-based view theory, that allows us to evaluate the basis of the competition. Basically, this resource-based view says that there are certain resources that are called BRIN resources that are key to gaining competitive advantage and, more important, sustaining competitive advantage. So if you have in the presence of those resources, you can do better than your competitors. And the resources, the characteristics of the resources is the resources has to be valuable. Meaning that if you want to win in NFL, you need to have the right personnel. They're valuable, and maybe you will figure out which position is the most valuable to your strategy. And not all positions may be, but some are very key. So it has to be valuable. It has to be rare too. A valuable resource that most organizations have doesn't provide strategic advantage. So it has to be rare. Other thing is it cannot be easily replicated. This resource cannot be easily replicated or imitated by your competitors. And because of many reasons, it could be because oil, for example, could be the geographic location where you're located, or it could be because of regulation, so economic and social political advantage. So imitation is not possible, easily possible, and also it doesn't have good enough substance. So if you have resource that has all of these or some combination of this, that will allow you to be competitive in your industry. So having explained this, looking through the view of resource-based view, what do you think the book argues, or what was the book's main thesis? And what was it competing? What did it argue that the companies can compete on? What type of resources did they argue the organizations can compete on? Looking to the view of resource based. What was the resource we're talking about? If there wasn't anyone, then they shouldn't be really saying competing on analytics. Okay, so if we, but how did competing on analytics led to the new product? So competing on innovation, competing on new product releases frequently, they're all bases of competition. But in light of the book, what is the resource that they're keying on, which they believe can allow companies to be competitive? Data, okay, is just possessing data enough? Okay, so personal who can resource the data to bring new insights. You can compete on that.
How about the skilled labor, the people? Is it need to analyze like that?
Okay.
That
So
makes
how-
it to have an advantage from other people. Like, you know, it's different. Me and Kate is different.
Okay, so you are competing on analytics by employing people who are good at
Exactly.
analytics. Okay? That's the research you can compete on. But even before you are convinced of hiring people who are good with analytics, there's a premise that analytics will lead to competitive advantage, right? That's given in here, that analytics can provide a competitive advantage. What is it about analytics that provides a competitive advantage? I know you know the answer. the technology allows you to do that, it is the insights or the knowledge gained by analytics. You would know something that your competitor does not know. That's rare, it's valuable, not immediately, hopefully immutable. Substitution is syndrome. But you have a piece of knowledge through analytics. Hara knew something about their customers that their competitors did not know. That's the reason. And in the book, the CEO of Vertex, he actually was a high-profile C-level member of Eli Lilly or some other pharmaceutical company and created his own company. And he says what you need in this business, in the pharmaceutical business, is more information than the other guy. Not smart, not more intuition, just more information. And that's the resource that the book is keying in on. The resource-based view, if you extend it to knowledge-based view of the firm, which is what Prahlad and people who are came up with the core competency papers are calling, we're competing on analytics on, that you compete based on your knowledge assets within your organization. If you can innovate, underlining premises, you have the intellectual property, you have the ability to create new products, which is completely associated with having knowledge. So firms are competing on knowledge. The knowledge-based view of the firm is what it is, what the book is arguing about. So if you know something about your customers, your engine, your employees, your personnel that your competitors don't know, then yes, analytics can help you not only gain the advantage, but sustain it. And that's what I was asking you when we discussed Hara's case. Can Hara sustain? Of course, it did gain competitive advantage. It was very obvious from the case. And then at the end, I asked you, can it sustain the competitive advantage? And the answer is, if they continue to know more about the consumer than the competitors, then yes, they'll sustain it. If there is a plateau where everybody knows everything about their consumer, there's no differentiation. The competing in analytics is basic on the premise that you are able to gain insights about your business, whether it's consumer, whether it is your machines, whether it is your product, whether it's your market, your employees, something about the key resource for your organization that your competitors will know. Okay. Some of the things we kind of didn't talk about is we did for the tangentially, but it didn't come out in the discussion is there are barriers to competing on, to be an organization that can compete on analytics. If it is a difficult thing to do, then in itself, competing on analytics is a competitive advantage. But you'll assume that it is new and it is painful, and eventually people will learn how to compete in analytics. But currently there are barriers to competing in analytics. What are some of the barriers, enemies, challenges to competing in analytics? That the book talked about, or anything that you can think of?
Having a strong knowledge base of how to use it.
The lack of would be, the absence would be a barrier, right? So how to, what type of analytics to use? What, yes.
The lack of CEO approval or understanding.
Okay, so not having the sponsorship of the key people. And what else?
Cost. You get over most of those, you can afford it.
So it is costly, it is, especially cost of failure would be very high. Anything else? Yes.
The worst thing is people's own mistakes and their own stupidity. It's nothing else but, them. Sometimes you just need to look yourself in the mirror and be like, oh yeah, I'm dumb.
So being dumb
So.
it will be another way.
Yeah, because if you cross lines and do things you shouldn't do, and if that's your choice, then you're gonna have to live with it, regardless of how you did it.
Yeah, but
Nothing
when
else
Andrew
matters.
came
You can't
and
blame
said-
other people for doing things. It's you. If you do it, it's like, oh, I killed this guy because I didn't think I'd get caught for killing him. No, you killed this guy. That's what matters. It doesn't matter where it was going to go down or how it was going to go down. If you choose to do things and it is exposed, then that's you. That's all you. So
Well, I don't
it's
know
not,
about exposure,
I don't know
not
if it's
doing.
about knowledge. It's more about a lack of intelligence on the firm level. And ethical choices and decisions, and setting yourself up for failure yourself, all yourself. Reaching into the data mines, doing something you shouldn't do, doing something you shouldn't do again and again and again, and having it be the exact thing that may be proposed by the customers. You're dumb, you need to admit it, and whatever you do probably won't work.
Well, IBM did it more and more. If you look back, IBM did it. I wouldn't say Microsoft is doing it, but they have a lot of money, but they have been in that frame of reference. So getting into a comfort zone of doing things that have worked in the past is nothing new. And that's why it is the smaller firms, the agile firms are able to compete with big firms like IBM and Microsoft. Habit is a key to competing on analytics. If you are used to making decisions with intuition and gut feeling, and you believe that it has worked, Palco, it was whatever that company is, at least in the book it was called Palco. It is, you could see the pains it has to go through. It didn't even realize it was losing a lot of money. Andrew, when he came and presented the Birch Company, you would think, why would a bunch of people who are bankers will be in such a position where they're losing a lot of money when they should, at least being bankers, should know this is not working for you. So it is nothing new. It happens again and again. It's a habit. And that needs to be changed. My father-in-law, I set up the online banking stuff for him, but he's always gone to the bank. And he feels secure going to the bank and finding out what the status of his savings are. The online thing scares him. So they have been doing this for 30, 40 years. To do things differently takes a change. And the change needs to happen in a variety of different ways. There's a change management domain, but organizations are used to making decisions with intuition and with gut. That needs to be changed. Nothing to analyze. If you don't have the data to gain insights from, then you can have all the good people who can analyze your stuff, you can have all the tools. You're not going to get the insight that will lead to competitive advantage, but that will lead to you knowing something that your competitors doesn't know. So Netflix and horror, if they didn't conduct the experiments, these are not embedded within the transactions. They conducted experiments to collect key data that will help them to gain advantage. So you need to have that data in order to even compete on analytics. No demand for it goes back to the habit. If you have great analytics, if you're not going to act and react on it, the key decision makers don't feel the need for using the analytics, then no matter how good your analytics are, it's not going to help you to compete on analytics. You have the information, but it's not applied. No patience for it. It is a tedious job. Conducting experiments over and over again, knowing what the consumer behaves, how they behave over time. It's not a one-time thing. If you have collected data for 3 years, it's not enough. You have to continue to do that, continue to clean it, and it requires patience. It requires a new way of thinking. So there are institutional barriers that are more key to competing on analytics than the technical barriers. So I think technical part is the easy part. How to build a data mart, or how to do data mining, and how to have people who can do data mining is the easier part. The institutional change is the harder part. And there are unknowns, and people should be apprehensive before they dive into this. They should know what the costs are. They should know what is the piece of knowledge that is going to give them the resource that is close to the RIN. If you after doing a great amount of analytics, you come up with a very commonsensical knowledge base, then why do all that stuff if it was a common knowledge? So you have to make sure that you're finding out pieces of nuggets that will allow you to be competitive. Otherwise, you're just wasting the money. And there is going to be resistance, and you need to have a way to know how you can overcome the resistance. We talked about is who's the audience. From most of you say it's CEO, high-level executives are the audience. And that's why the scope of the book is the way it is. Many of you say it just tells you about descriptive things about analytics, how analytics were done in a company. And that's the purpose. It's an inspirational book. It inspires you to say, oh, this can be done, this has been done, this can be done in my organization. It is not a book that focuses on, okay, tell me how to do it. It is focused on CEOs who hopefully are the ones who are inspiring their organization to go in some direction. So the focus was inspiration, the focus was description, not prescription. There are books which are prescriptive in nature, but this was, the audience was senior leadership who have power over resources so they can direct the company in the direction they want. What are some of the key attributes of the audience, the CEOs, the audience who will be reading this book? What are some of the leadership qualities that you look for that type of people who are going to lead the company? One key is vision. One key is vision, and also ability to lead people into it. And that's what the book was trying to do. If they can inspire this bunch of people, it is a given that these people are inspirational within their organization and capable of leading other people in the direction, in whatever direction they feel is right for the company. So vision is very critical in order for the CEO to lead the company well. The CEO doesn't need to know how to. He can employ or she can employ people who can tell him how to, but they need to know where to go. Another thing is also, I don't think, hopefully, it's not that this book convinces the person and they go back home or they go back to the company in the morning and say, we are going to do analytics. It's not about believing, and many times the inspirational leaders led to believing, and that is very dangerous. It should be also data-driven. They get inspired and they say, okay, let's try this out in my company. With one unit, with one thing, let's see whether it works for us and how it works for us. There has to be proof of concept before they can dive into it. So the book was just a starting point, giving them inspiration to at least start doing some analytics in their company. And I do not know whether this quote was in the book or not. This is a fairly popular quote. The retired CEO, Sarah Lee Bakery, had a sign on his desk. It says, in God we trust, all others bring data. So That is a tech, even if it's not that we are just going to start doing analytics, but rather, okay, let's collect this data, let's see what happens, let's figure out what data we need, and see what works for us. Role of information technology. Implicit, hopefully that was not something that, given that we have read before about data marking, data cleaning, it was obvious, but otherwise it was quite implicit, hidden. Well, the main key component of information technology in the system here is information. Clean data that is provided, allows you to collect, that can be handled. There are prescriptive books that can help further. This is a starting point. Give you the key words that you can search on. And most importantly, this was the bug, in a way, a rebuttal to Carr's article called IP is a commodity and cannot help with strategic advantage. As an indirect approach, and the technology was not the center of the book, just peripheral, where they're making a case through examples that IT can help to gain and sustain control. Last minute comments? No? Then group 1 and 3, I need to speak to you. All others, feel free to go.